if you have AI write a report for you, you have to be an expert and you have to be able to read the report and correct it.
Welcome back to another installment of the Next Gen Case Study Series. On this episode today, we have Eric Parent, who is the CEO of Eva Technologies, a company specializing in advanced cybersecurity solutions. And with over 30 years of experience, Eric has been at the forefront of the cybersecurity field, providing expert guidance to major corporations and government agencies, which is why we're excited to have him on the show. Eric, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So to get things started here, Eric, I'd love to kind of do a little bit of a dive into your history, where you came from and how you landed as the CEO of Eva Technologies.
Well, actually, I'm an ex-military guy. So when I left the forces, I didn't leave because it was a bad place. I left because it wasn't something that was ideal for my type of profile. So I'm very energetic, a little hyper, if you will, and I like to fix problems a lot faster than the government likes to fix problems. So I joined the military when I was quite young, did my 3 years, stepped out of that role. And then started doing contract work basically in IT. And cybersecurity didn't exist back then because we're going back quite a while, but security did, obviously. Security has always been around. And that gravitated towards more complicated mandates of helping enterprises with whatever problems they had at that time, 30 years ago. And eventually in 96, I created my own company because I wanted to obviously get the tax benefits, but also I wanted to scale. I wanted to add, not that I wanted to scale in the sense that I wanted a big business with a whole bunch of people, but I realized that it was no fun doing it all by yourself. So I wanted to hire some people. I had obviously crossed plenty of people that had talent. And we sort of started a boys club or a boys or girls club where we would just get people that we crossed that have a similar philosophy, that do good quality work. And instead of everybody starting their own little enterprise and doing their thing on their own, we started doing it all together. And that grew into many other areas of interest, if you will. By in 2006, we realized that we were always fixing the same problems. So we started developing an audit, for lack of a better term. I prefer maybe evaluation, but a way to look at enterprises and hit the ground running really quickly, because it was very obvious to us as experts what enterprises needed to do in what sequence in order to address security in the most cost-effective way, because security is it appears to be a really complicated subject, and people can throw money at that stuff like crazy. Doesn't mean they're actually going to fix the actual problem. Doesn't mean they're not going to have a breach. So it's like anything. You can't throw all your money in one thing. You have to spread it out in a logical way. And determining the logical way of spreading it out, because you do have limited resources, requires a little bit of finesse, a little bit of talent. And since we had the talent, we developed frameworks to take a company, put them through a process, like a 4-step process, basically, where we help them figure out where they should be going. And then it's still up to them, obviously, to take the decisions to get them there. And that brought us some clients, always word of mouth, usually. And that brought us one international client, which we took charge of their security across 45 countries. So started small and made it, gradually went up into a pretty big playing field. Doing an international client that's in 45 countries, or actually 40 countries, because we happen to have clients in 5 or 6 other countries. So we end up being in 45 countries. But it's a challenging thing, and it took us out of our comfort zone. And we developed tools once again to be able to supervise that and to run with that without having to hire 20 people to do it. So we can take charge of some really complex projects within the company, and with only a few people, actually. So we're really cost effective, efficient, and that's because we have the tools and now we have the experience.
It's kind of it's common for businesses to kind of be built on this idea of referrals and networking and doing a good job and other people talking about you. I think is a huge part of what makes referral marketing or that style of customer acquisition beneficial. But therein lies the problem, Eric, is that in order to be talked about, you have to have something worth talking about. And it seems like you've done something different, because this isn't successful for everybody who tries to start up a business, or especially in security. What can you attribute that success to outside of just being around for so long?
Well, I think you're right on too. Like you're right on that, and it brings to mind another problem. Obviously, scalability. Like my model doesn't scale. So I can't tell you when my next client's going to walk through the door because it's literally been like somebody calls me up and says, "Hey, we're in trouble or we're having this big problem, and I was talking to my friend X, and he's done business with you, and you're taking care of their security, and he says you can, fix this with your eyes closed." And then I say, "Great, let's do it." And but you can't scale that. It's like
Right.
you can't tell when the next one's going to be coming. So I don't know why we've been successful when it comes to the word of mouth thing, aside from the fact that obviously we're it sounds stupid to say, but we target 100% satisfaction. What that means is we have zero tolerance for a client that's having a bad day. They're having a bad day for us. It's all hands on deck. It's like, what's going on? How can we fix it? And even if it's outside of our scope, so we've stepped up. We've had customers that have problems with something related with IT, obviously, because that's our forte. And that's why we'd be perhaps in the meeting and able to overhear that. But if we see that somebody's not fixing the problem, and then we'll actually suggest that we'll just push whoever aside and we'll just take care of it. And that has nothing to do with our mandate, but it shows that we're in a partnership with our clients. And if they're having a bad day, then we want to be having a bad day alongside them. We want to be there to help them out, basically. So once again, maybe hard to scale, but as long as you hire the right people, then you can have that attitude. So far the team's grown obviously over the 20 plus years that the company has been around, and it's not that we haven't had people that didn't fit the model, but we get rid of them. Sounds rude, but if we see within the few weeks, few months that the philosophy is not going to stick, then we will exclude that person. We don't want to be working with somebody in our team that's not going to have the exact same philosophy that we have. That the client, it's not that client's always right, by the way, because I'm a very verbal person in the French media. I'm in the news almost every week, and I speak my mind. And that's my role with my client also. It's just that you got to do it the right way. So it doesn't mean to do it in front of everybody, but it may mean to take a walk with them and tell them what true colors are, and to be quite honest and frank and brutally direct about where you think your experience is telling you they're going. And I think that's the forte, really. That's what got us to have clients that stick. And then if you're dealing with middle management and they change enterprise, then they bring you along. They call you up and say, "Hey, I'm working at this place now, and I want you in here." Because for them, it's a checklist item. We take care of the security component. We tell them what their roadmap's going to do. We basically give it to them. Doesn't mean they have to do it. That's the whole philosophy, right? It's like we'll like educate the client on what we think they should be doing, and we'll work with them to figure out what their actual game plan is. They're free to not do any of it, or they're free to only do half of it. But we're there to act as an expert, sort of like plugging in a chief security officer into their company or an entire team of security people into their team. So that's the success part, and how it would scale, and that I would not know.
Yeah, well, that's the proverbial problem, right? In growing the business. And I picked up on two things that you mentioned. In spite of the fact that maybe you don't know why the word of mouth is going so far, I think that I can tell you that these two things are significantly contributing to it. The first thing that really stood out to me was how you work to nurture your company culture, to subscribe to a particular set of philosophies that are aimed at serving the client, going above and beyond, and making sure that what they need, they have. And so that I think is a really big contributing factor. And then the other one is your communication, the way that you communicate with the people that you serve. And I don't just mean your clients, I mean the people that are inside the company. The company culture itself has sounds like has been fostered around having those open channels of communication um, without necessarily maybe judgment or stopping somebody from doing that. So, okay, that being the case, did some of your early influences, or sorry, early experiences influence the way that you approach that company culture thing?
I think so. I was lucky enough to work with I guess, some bright people. Some of them, everybody has their quirks, right?
Mhm.
But I remember one guy in particular. He basically told me, and this was right after I was in the military, so the philosophy was really, the same. He goes, "If you come to us and you ask for a budget to fix something, don't come back to me and ask for more money. It's like
Mm.
you come to me once, disturb me once, tell me what it's going to cost, and then get it done." And so that's sort of the same approach, right? So for us, like our large client, obviously it's a very large client, so it's a large contract. But I haven't sent a change request into that company since we've had that relationship for almost 10 years now. So we've scoped it, and if we have to do something extra, we just do it. Obviously, if it was a huge thing, if there was a major change in the relation on what we're actually doing, then we would treat it like a new project. We're not idiots. But when it comes to doing, if we're going to do a couple extra days work, we're never going to bother the client with getting a PO for something like that. And that's the type of, relationship that we want for our clients. Going back to the partnership thing, where I don't see my client as a bag of money. I see my client as an opportunity for all of us to enjoy what we do and to work progressively with them to get to a common point.
So what do you do then to impart that belief or that philosophy into the team that you are collaborating with?
I think you attract people that are similar to you. So the same way that clients, when it comes to the word of mouth stuff, either they like the philosophy or they're freaked out by it and they go away and they never become a client. So the ones that stick to it are the ones that say, you know what, I like this. It's quite honest, it's direct, it's very transparent. There's no hidden crap. It's like what you see is what you get. And so when it comes to employees, well, that's perhaps I'm the one that's going to approach somebody. So that means I've seen certain things when in the way they do whatever they do. I do teach occasionally. I teach in universities, so I can recruit sometimes from students. Now, that's because I preach my philosophy, and you see the ones that ask entertaining questions, the ones that are interactive with you. That's because they're lighting up at what you're saying, and so that gives you potential candidates of saying, well, these 3 people out of 60, it's not a huge percentage, but these 3 people, the way they react to the material I'm presenting, seem like they might have a philosophy that may work with that. And then you sit down with them and you basically walk through it with them. Everybody is at one point is going to say, somebody at my client, for example, well, that person's stupid. Look at this. Look at what they've done. And the way to process that emotionally and the way to get that into your head. And by the way, I'm no different. I can definitely watch and look at an email and say, wow, this person is, not the brightest. But you have to control that. And you have to say to yourself, if this person was the brightest, then they wouldn't need us. The reason they do business with us is because we make it easy and they don't have to have the expertise. So what seems obvious to us is not obvious to them, and that's why they need us. So the same way that if I talk to a cardiologist and I tell him, perhaps what I eat or what I do, he may say, Eric, you're an idiot. Well, that's not my expertise. I am not a cardiologist. So that's the type of philosophy that we try to find or nurture. And so my role sometimes in a meeting, in a private meeting that we have as a group, if somebody is saying something that I feel may require this kind of add-on of philosophy of saying, hold on, I'm just going to stop you right there. What you just said is technically correct, but remember, our role is to make it easy for the client. And if the client was smarter than us, then they wouldn't need us.
There's a nurturing quality to that I find very admirable, that you would take the time to go over these things with the people, and I think that contributes to your success. On the topic of success, I'm curious how you measure it, because I don't want to go as far as to insult you and say that you don't really have a plan, but I think that over
No, that would be accurate.
well, and that's right, but over 3 decades of experience, Eric, it seems like you have carved out something that you just instinctively know. So this might be a challenge. However, I'd love to see if we can extract from you a little bit about what that process looks like, and then how do you measure the success of both your clients, but then and your business as well.
Well, I guess there are some metrics. For example, when we take a client, we measure their current maturity with regards to information security, cybersecurity, things that have to do with security.
Okay.
So the clients we have are very rarely one-timers. So the reason we do a one-timer is just because somebody is in deep trouble and somebody we trust, one of our perhaps regular clients, called us up, said, can you help them? And then, we'll help them. But normally what we have is very long-term relationships. We're talking that span decades. And so we're constantly working with them. Therefore, we can reevaluate their maturity every year. So that gives us metrics to see if it's going in the right direction. Now, here's the reality. Most enterprises think they're a 3 on 5 when it comes to their maturity. The reality is they're pretty much all between 0 and 1. Now, that's a hard reality. You can't come out and say that to a client until you've evaluated them, because once you've evaluated them, you have the metrics, you have all the details, and you can tell them why their score is 0.75. And you can tell them how you're going to get them to be a 1, a 1.5, a 2, and eventually a 3, but you're never going to be a 5. So that's part of the philosophy also. Maybe in one particular area, you're going to aim for perfection, but the reality is only the military is aiming for perfection. So one of our clients sells underwear, feminine underwear. Well, I love using them as an example because I say, you know what, their business deal is 3 pairs for $50. Nobody wants to buy $1,000 underwear. So that means that we have to come up with a plan that progressively makes their security better without costing an arm and a leg, without killing the baby or throwing the baby out of the bathwater. So essentially, that's how we would measure it from the client point of view. After that, we measure it internally, but that's purely subjective. We every week we have a team meeting and we go through the client roster and we say, how are we feeling? Do we feel that there's perhaps something that needs to be done for that client? Is there something that we hear or feel or what have you? And so we follow up on that. Now, we've built tools for that. Obviously, project management tools have existed forever, but they're always complicated. So we built our own. We built our own workflow, our own tools. And that's why if a company like our large client calls us up and they have a challenge with one of their other partners doing a particular project that's complicated, we've actually stepped in and said, you're going to use our tools. And so we had Orange and we had Price Waterhouse that actually used our tools because they needed to hit the ground running with a very complex project, and they only had a few weeks to start producing results. So we said, well, this is how you're going to do it. And that's sort of the attitude thing too. That's sort of the military in me. When we won this big client, the project was complicated, but the way I presented to them, since I was a small company bidding against these very, very large companies, I basically told them, this is the only way this project can be done. And you can do it with me, you can do it without me, but you can take my philosophy and my thinking of how to do this project, and you can do whatever you want with it. And this is how you do it. And I broke it down for them. And then we build the tools to support it. And now we're really getting the benefit out of it. Because if we had another client that has 50 countries in their operations, we could hit the ground running instantly. We literally deployed a full-blown vulnerability management, monitoring, assessment, and management program within a few months across 45 individual entities.
Wow, that is impressive. There's a significant amount of workload that goes into something like that. The word of mouth and growing and building a business around that kind of referral thing, it happens very slow. And you've mentioned a couple of times that it doesn't scale, right? And so if it were, or maybe it's not meant to, but I'm curious to pick your brain on um, how you would scale it if you were to, and what role technology and AI and things like that would play in it. Because I know that at the top here, before we hit the cameras, you mentioned that it's not necessarily something that you're deploying currently, and so I'd love to get your thoughts on it. How do you feel about the space? Is there room for it? Is it helping or hindering? Just what do you think generally about that new technology?
I say it doesn't scale. What I mean is it doesn't scale on its own. So if you do
Mm,
nothing, you like I mentioned, you don't know when your next client is going to come. There are probably plenty of ways that a marketing professional or somebody who has that forte, somebody who has that experience can do something with word of mouth. Because you can get customer testimonials. You can reach out to your best customers and you can ask them, what can you introduce me to 3 of your buddies? Because when you're the founder, the owner of a $500 million company in whatever niche market, you probably know 3 or 4 other owners of not necessarily similar companies, but similar in the sense non-competing companies.
mhm.
So we've never leveraged that. And that's what I mean by it doesn't scale in the sense that we haven't done anything with it. If we hired somebody to look at that, that's hopefully, that would be my litmus test. I'd sit back and wait and see what they say. But I'd expect them to come to the table and say, well, listen, we found 40 different things that you can do, and one of them should be what I just mentioned, because why not leverage these existing relationships? So now using AI, if you can probably use AI to analyze what these companies, what the current customers you have look like, figure out perhaps what similar personas are going to be, and then even perhaps pull out a list saying, here's a whole bunch of customers that are very much like these, non-competing. And then you can actually start trying to get introduced to them and saying, by the way, we're already taking care of this customer, this customer, this customer. They're in a space very similar to yours. And so we'd like to, an hour of your time to whatever, I'm not a salesperson. So AI can certainly be used for accelerating that process. If not, then you have to hire one or more or many people to actually do these steps, right? Do all these baby steps. So I know if I sit down in front of ChatGPT today and then ask them, how should I do my marketing plan or whatever, it'll come up with a whole list of stuff that I could do. And then I have to address each one of them, right? So if somebody has all the experience and the time to use AI, they can probably address all the chunks in the workflow. So I'm sure it's going to change the world. It already has. I use it. I'm a hardcore technical person, and I still use it to write, technical reports that don't contain obviously sensitive customer data and stuff like that. But if I'll write a paragraph sometimes, and I look at it and I'll say, that can be better. I'll just cut and paste it in ChatGPT and say, make it better, and then it'll play with it. And it doesn't mean I agree with all of it, but I mean, it'll fix a good chunk of my problem. So AI is definitely an accelerator, and it's here to stay. So, we might as well sleep with it because it's going to be around.
Yeah, there's a necessity to kind of embrace technology as it continues to evolve, and being somebody who's been shaping that landscape, I'm sure you've contributed significantly over the last 30 years to a number of different things that that we don't really even know exist. And then there's the prospect of what's on the horizon. And I mean, on that note, Eric, is there anything in the way of tools and technologies and things like that that are kind of coming down the pipeline that you're excited about?
Well, the AI thing is obviously the big subject of the day, just because it applies also to security, right? Doing the analysis of security within an enterprise or security within software. And it's not necessarily new, right? AI has exploded in the last year, last couple of years, but really exploded in the last year. But if you go back 4 years, there was already AI used to mount attacks on computer systems. And the one of the conferences in Las Vegas, the DEF CON conference, had actually a huge budget given to them by DARPA, the Defense Research Organization. And they had teams up there, university teams, that created computer systems that attack computer systems. And one system was attacking, the other was supposed to self-heal. And there was no user intervention. These things just went at it and demonstrated that it's all possible. And this is 4 or 5 years ago. So that's one big thing that's coming, that's going to change things in my industry, just because the threat level is constantly changing, right? It's getting worse and worse. And what's not changing is management's understanding of risks. Risks, specifically cybersecurity risks, don't flow to the top. Depends on the company, obviously. If it's a small company, then there's only one person, so it obviously flows to the top. But if there's some kind of chain of command there, the message just doesn't get to the top, and the risks are just ignored in the sense that management doesn't know about them. So there's a huge, huge challenge there to address that. Aside from that, philosophically, what else is going to change? Wow, who knows? Everything is changing really quickly, and the AI game, I think, is going to be one of the big catalysts in that.
And what about for Eva? What kind of big goals are you aiming at now?
Well, we're dividing our customers now into 3 groups. So the first one is going to be addressed in a few months. We've developed a mom and pop product, something that we can scale to unlimited amounts, essentially, that in a way self-evaluate and give them a certain level of self-service, but they can still reach an expert if they need it. And then the middle tier, which has been our bread and butter for forever, for like 15 years now, is the security package, where we plug in a security team into the company and start providing oversight, because everything we do is usually oversight driven. So it's not like we don't want to manage your antivirus. We want to tell you should have one,
Right.
And if you have the wrong one, then we want to make sure we explain to you why we think you should change solutions. But we don't do operational security unless the shit hits the proverbial fan and you're in trouble. If you're in trouble, we roll up the sleeve and we'll dive in. But we don't want that to be a role, because if we're operating your IT, or operating a portion of your IT, then we can't criticize it. And that's the whole thing that we preach. We say you need to have somebody independent we can come in and tell you what your health check is. You don't ask yourself what your health is. You go to a doctor and they evaluate you. So that's essentially what we're doing with that middle tier. And then the last one is the large customer one. Since we've developed all the tool sets and we're sitting on that right now, we have to find a way to get another large distributed client that has isolated IT. So that client that we had, that we still have, is a great client. But we've built such a huge tool set and a huge amount of expertise on that to do nothing with it seems really foolish, seems almost criminal towards our own benefits. So we're looking for that next client, which is going to have operations in multiple countries, but where each country does their own thing, because that's our forte, how to get all this, glued together so that we can get a global view on what's going on in each one of these divisions. So that we have no plan for, aside from the fact that we know we want to try to find the second large client, but we haven't worked on the plan. So no plan.
True to your nature, Eric, and I love that for you. I think being flexible and keeping your eyes on the prize has served you tremendously in the last few decades of the work that you've been doing, and that's admirable. You've been very generous with your time here and your wisdom and your insight, and I'm very grateful for that, Eric. I'd like to kind of leave things off here on a high note, if we could. If there was a piece of advice that you could offer somebody who's in a similar position, who's kind of exploring some of these technologies, what would that piece of advice be?
Oh, wow. I would say don't jump too fast. Like get your head around it so you understand what you're getting into. But it really depends which piece of technology, mind you, because AI, you can start using it today. So I'll give you the most basic piece of advice. If you have AI write a report for you, you have to be an expert and you have to be able to read the report and correct it. Because I've seen people stumble on that and just send off reports that have been generated with AI, and AI is not perfect. Okay, so you're still the expert. Somebody still needs to vet that product. Aside from that, there's so many options with AI now that you can use it to leverage all sorts of business processes that I think it's really worth looking into. I would always, as a security person, though, I would always try to have somebody at the table that's going to be criticizing what are the possibilities that AI screws up, because it's your business, right? So if you let AI go, even for simple things, like somebody was mentioning to me this week, they're looking at technology for quality control that uses AI. So I explained to them that there's two types. There's the first type, you've got all the French fries from McDonald's that are going down a conveyor belt, and the cameras use AI, for lack of a better term, to spot a bad-looking potato or French fry, and to use a jet of air to blow it out of the production line. Basically, it's got a black mark on it. We don't like it. We push it aside. So that's more of an expert system. It's very trained to a very specific task. Some of these systems will have AI. I used a very simple example, but some of them will have some form of AI. But it's a very contained type of scenario. The other type, for quality control, will actually use its brain and will actually figure out, take decisions on things and build its own knowledge base. That's more hazardous, obviously, because it's a lot harder to test. How do you know it's doing a good job? So you'll have to put in checks and balances and make sure that it is doing a good job, or that you're periodically checking to make sure that the quality control, you're basically doing quality control on your quality control.
If you're not careful, you could end up doubling the workload.
Right. Well, ultimately, the point is you're responsible. A human is responsible. You can't blame the AI. So you just have to remember that as a manager, as a business owner, it's swell to put this stuff in, but if it goes to crap and you have to face your customers, are you going to say it's John's fault, or are you going to say, well, it's the AI's fault? It's a lot easier to blame a person than it is to, and that's why airplanes. People have been talking about. I'm actually a pilot, so I love that all the airplane stuff because I always also work for Bombardier, and I've done some complex mandates for some of the aviation companies. So people are always asking, are we going to have pilotless airplanes? And as far as I can tell, no. Because you can always sue the companies if the plane without a pilot had a problem. You can say, well, obviously, the computer did something wrong. If there's a pilot on there, you can always say, well, it happens. It's human error. And then so the liability is completely different. So I think it's going to take an awful lot of time before we have pilotless airplanes. In fact, I'm convinced I'll be dead by that time.
Well, that's good. We don't need any of those airplanes malfunctioning while they're doing their job. So that's that's
Well, honestly, AI can usually do a better job than a human, but then the lawyers get in there. So it's like, well, how are you going to prove that you have no liability if a plane crashes and it has nothing to do with the AI. If there's no pilot on board, how are you gonna, how are you gonna get out of that? Why the plane crash?
Right. Plausible deniability, as it were.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a very common term in large enterprises. The whole legal department is called the plausible deniability department.
Yes. Well, Eric, you've been very helpful. And I thank you for that. To kind of to wrap things up here, if somebody wanted to reach out to you to pick your brain further or perhaps work with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Oh, email or phone, whatever works.
We'll link to that in the show notes and make sure that whoever's watching or listening, if they want to, they'll be able to get in touch with you easily there. And on that note, if you wanted to get in touch with me and my team for any reason, you can visit nextgengrowth.com. Otherwise, that's it for this episode, and I will see you in the next.